Imagine being trapped on a floating metal island, surrounded by hostile forces, with a dwindling food supply and no clear way home. Right now, in the narrow, treacherous waters of the Strait of Hormuz, that is the terrifying reality for over 20,000 innocent sailors. Roughly 1,600 commercial vessels are locked in a high-stakes geopolitical standoff between the United States and Iran. Following the explosive war that kicked off in February 2026, Iran effectively slammed the door shut on one of the world's most vital waterways. This isn't just a regional dispute, it is a global crisis that is strangling international trade. Welcome to the 2026 Strait of Hormuz crisis, a volatile powder keg where one wrong move could plunge the Middle East right back into a devastating full-scale war. Let's break down exactly how we got here and why a massive U.S. military operation to free these ships was just abruptly paused. To break this massive blockade, U.S. President Donald Trump announced a highly ambitious military initiative on May 3rd, dubbed Project Freedom. The plan was straightforward but incredibly dangerous. Use the overwhelming might of the U.S. Navy and Air Force to escort neutral commercial ships safely out of the Iranian trap. U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth described it as a strictly defensive humanitarian mission to restart the free flow of commerce. The U.S. deployed heavy hitters, guided missile destroyers, over 100 land and sea-based aircraft, and 15,000 troops, all synchronized by the 82nd Airborne Division. The message to Tehran was clear. The U.S. would create a secure protective corridor, and any interference would be met with devastating force. For the trapped sailors, Project Freedom looked like the ultimate lifeline. But as the saying goes, no plan survives first contact with the enemy. Project Freedom officially launched on Monday, May 4th, and almost immediately the Gulf erupted into chaos. U.S. Central Command reported that as the first ships tried to move, they were forced to intercept Iranian cruise missiles and drones. Admiral Brad Cooper stated that U.S. forces destroyed 6, later updated to 7, small Iranian fast attack boats that were threatening the operation. Meanwhile, a South Korean cargo ship, the HMM Namu, suffered a mysterious explosion and caught fire off the coast of the UAE. Despite the U.S. claiming that 2 American-flagged vessels, including a Maersk carrier, successfully navigated the strait, Iran furiously denied these claims. Tehran retaliated by allegedly launching strikes against the UAE and Oman, plunging the fragile April ceasefire into extreme jeopardy. Given the intense firefights and the successful transit of the first few ships, the world braced for a massive escalation. But then, in a stunning twist just 24 hours later, President Trump hit the brakes. Taking to Truth Social, Trump abruptly announced that Project Freedom would be paused for a, quote, short period of time. The sudden reversal left military analysts and the international shipping community completely stunned. Just hours before the post, top U.S. officials like Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Defense Secretary Hegseth were publicly championing the operation, boasting that hundreds of ships were lining up to leave and that Iran's grip on the strait was an illusion. The whiplash was real. Why stop a mission that had barely just begun, leaving thousands of sailors still stranded? The answer to that sudden pause lies in the shadows of international diplomacy. In his announcement, Trump cited a specific request from Pakistan, along with, quote, other countries, to halt the military escorts. Since the April 8th ceasefire, Pakistan has emerged as the critical middleman in this conflict. With no direct diplomatic relations between Washington and Tehran, Pakistani officials have been acting as the vital bridge, literally relaying messages between the two capitals and even hosting direct talks in Islamabad. According to U.S. officials, negotiations are painstakingly slow, with messages allegedly being hand-delivered to Iranian leaders in hiding. Pakistan urged the U.S. to pause the escort missions because the kinetic firefights in the strait were threatening to derail backroom progress toward a, quote, complete and final agreement. To understand why Iran might be willing to negotiate at all, we have to look back at what happened just a month prior. Trump claimed in his post that the U.S. has had, quote, tremendous military success. He is referring to, quote, Operation Epic Fury. Back in March 2026, the U.S. military effectively decimated the Iranian Navy. The Pentagon dropped massive 5,000-pound bunker-buster bombs on hardened anti-ship cruise missile sites. They sank 16 Iranian mine layers and destroyed over 150 warships across 16 different classes. President Trump bluntly stated that the Iranian Navy had been annihilated and was resting at the bottom of the sea. Secretary Rubio confirmed that the offensive stage of the war is entirely over. Iran is currently operating with a severely crippled military infrastructure, which heavily incentivizes them to find a diplomatic off-ramp before suffering further losses. However, Iran still holds one massive trump card: the geography of the Strait of Hormuz itself. Even without a massive fleet, by mining the waters and using asymmetric drone warfare, they have managed to keep the strait closed. This is no small issue. Approximately 1/5 of the entire globe's oil consumption passes through this single narrow waterway. The effective closure of the strait has sent global fuel prices skyrocketing. It isn't just oil. Fertilizer and vital petroleum products are trapped. This is creating a ripple effect that is rattling the global economy, driving up inflation and squeezing consumers at the pump worldwide. Iran is deliberately weaponizing the global supply chain, knowing that the economic pain felt in Western capitals is their strongest piece of leverage in these peace talks. And that economic pain brings us to the domestic reality facing the Trump administration. The pause isn't just about diplomacy, it's about politics. In the United States, rising gasoline prices are proving incredibly awkward for Republicans, especially with midterm elections rapidly approaching. Furthermore, the Trump administration is up against the clock regarding the War Powers Resolution. This U.S. law requires a president to seek formal approval from Congress for military action 60 days after it begins. The 60-day deadline for the Iran conflict expired just last week. By declaring the offensive war terminated and pivoting to a defensive and humanitarian posture with Project Freedom, the administration is trying to avoid a massive political battle in Congress while keeping voters happy. Critics argue this pause makes Trump look like he's retreating, giving Iran the political upper hand. But don't mistake the pause of Project Freedom for an end to hostilities. While the U.S. is holding off on escorting ships through the strait, their aggressive naval blockade of Iranian ports remains in full force. The U.S. military continues to patrol the skies with over 100 aircraft providing 24-hour defensive overwatch. This ongoing blockade is slowly strangling Tehran. By completely depriving Iran of the oil revenue it desperately needs to shore up an already failing economy, the U.S. is applying maximum pressure. Millions of Iranian citizens are currently struggling with soaring, unmanageable inflation and massive job losses. It's a brutal economic siege. The U.S. strategy is clear. Pause the immediate risky firefights in the strait to give diplomacy a chance, but keep the economic boot firmly on Iran's neck until they sign a final agreement. So what happens next? The Gulf is currently caught in a fragile, terrifying limbo. There are concrete offers on the table, but massive sticking points remain. The United States is demanding a major rollback or complete abandonment of Iran's disputed nuclear program. In return, Iran insists on maintaining long-term control and management of the Strait of Hormuz. Iranian officials have publicly stated that the status quo is intolerable for America, hinting they are willing to wait out the economic pain if it means achieving their strategic goals. Meanwhile, the clock is ticking for the 1,600 vessels and 20,000 sailors still trapped in the crossfire. Will the back-channel talks in Pakistan yield a historic peace deal, or is the pause of Project Freedom just the deep breath before the region plunges back into a devastating conflict? Only time will tell.